Alright, I'm going to start out with the most important one while you're fresh. Why should anyone care about the model of hierarchical complexity?
Oh, they shouldn't. They should remain stupid and idiotic.
Well, how does it help combat stupidity and idiocy?
Well, I mean, as far as I can tell, there are only two major parts to predicting and understanding behavior. One is value, which has been known pretty much forever. And the other is the difficulty of tasks, which has been known, but has not been modeled very well. I mean, stage theory, which the model comes from, the model is a combination of stage theory and measurement theory. And measurement theory really is relatively new, late 1920s, Thurstone, scales, when we began to understand scales. Stevens, after World War in the 50s, understood four basic kinds of scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. But scaling, what was missing from stage theory of Baldwin and Piaget is they had no way to determine really what they didn't have their math. Inhelder and Piaget were very close because all the stages they came up with turned out to be true, but they were incomplete. They had no way to know that because they didn't have a mathematical theory that was correct. They had logic, but they already knew that there was no logic until early concrete.
So to pull back for a second.
So anyway, it's the only mathematical theory of difficulty.
And how does that help people?
Well, if you don't know how difficult things are, you can't understand what controls decisions. And what David said in discussing hierarchical difficulty of tasks and the value of making various choices is that if you don't have both, you don't understand the interaction between the two. And without taking into consideration, you just get a very false picture of the world. So, for instance, political science and social psychology is really the study of formal and transitional to systematic stage college students. So it has no generality. And so it makes huge mistakes. And political science is the study of voters. So it doesn't tell you about the developmental origins of political behavior. It's why the Chinese are not very good at politics, because they never grow up. They have too much homework for kids to engage in politics.
Can you explain that? Does that relate to stage theory?
Yeah, because they never have a childhood. If you don't have a childhood and you don't engage in political activity, you're never going to have social perspective taking skills, especially applied to politics. So that's what we found in the analysis of our Chinese data. Remember, they're low, even lower than the U.S. sample.
So you're telling me that if more people understood the model of hierarchical complexity, there would be better social perspective taking?
Of course.
Is that right?
And policies, but I would say the whole point of the model is it replaces ideas like IQ, which turn out, all the psychometric things are either value or hierarchical task difficulty. And if you don't have the basic scales right, you can't get anything right. I mean, it's like phlogiston. I mean, basically, psychology is mid 19th century because it confuses all the basic. It has no theory of measurement associated with it. And behavior analysis is a complete mess because they don't even understand the importance of value. They give lip service to it, but they don't understand value. They don't understand that you have to that it's one big theory of value and it's and difference equations of it. So they make stupid statements like if you change contingencies, you change the way people allocate behavior. But they don't understand that if you don't consider the structure of society in a model of hierarchical complexity way, you're just going to be trying to go through the brambles. You're not going to get anywhere without getting cut up and failing. You know in the woods how when we're orienteering we get to brambles, we go elsewhere.
So
okay.
The model can help us avoid brambles. You've given us lots of examples of that in different fields.
Right, yeah. And, it's like prisons. They don't work, but they don't know why they don't work. They think and operant forays into trying to fix prisons have been total failure. Yes. And operant approaches to education have been a total failure. Programmed instruction, which is inherently developmental, has been moderately successful, but Joe Lang's company, who you have great respect for, did not find a significant difference. And what he was missing was the developmental aspect and the gamification. So he thought just sequencing alone and using prompts and so forth would do it. It doesn't. You have to have a comprehensive theory, and it has to be very simple. Comprehensive and simple. And we just published how many papers in Stage and Value? There were like 12 papers showing the interaction between the order of hierarchical complexity of tasks and reinforcement contingencies. I mean, you can't imagine any manipulation of therapy. They don't even. Michael Bassages and Michael Masculo actually wrote a pretty decent book on showing that basically what therapy does is change people's stage by one. At least they had a developmental aspect, but they don't understand why interventions work or don't work.
All right, so that was a very good overview of various reasons why the model's important.
Well, I don't think so. It doesn't explain. I mean, without the model, you can't explain terrorism.
Right.
You can't explain why technology, why a very small country like Israel is so dominant in the world, can defeat armies 10 times the size. Doesn't explain. You have to understand those people who are better at successfully addressing more hierarchically complex tasks win. Why Hollywood wins over the rest of the world, including the U.S. Army and armed forces. It doesn't tell you. And there's simple rules that if you make your statements, if you make your stories accessible to multiple stages with very high stage overarching content, you win. And
any tricks to doing that?
yes, you have to be able to tell a story that resonates at every stage, and you have to check that it does. If it doesn't resonate, even at stage 5, nominal, so that people form an attachment relationship with differentiation. They can see themselves as being the person, and they also can differentiate from being that person. If that's not in the story, people will not be interested. It won't have any effect. So you have to address every stage. And if you don't, you lose. And that's why Hollywood people are smarter than Harvard professors. The writers in Hollywood are smarter. And the smartest people are the show creators.
Yeah.
Not
Smarter than the directors?
Yes. The show creators are usually directors and writers and producers. But you have to start out. You have to. It's really very hard to do. And people say, well, why are these Hollywood people paid so well? They're paid so well because it's so difficult to do. How many people can write a TV program? Not many. How many academics can write anything that anybody wants to read? Very, very few. So we'll take another thing.
All right.
Burnout. Why does burnout occur? Because ineffective understanding of the difficulty of the task, not taking a developmental perspective, and therefore the rate of success is low, so people burn out.
Is this burnout in every profession?
Every profession.
It's caused by misassessment of difficulty?
Yes.
So,
I mean, why do you think people retire? Because it's not very reinforcing the work they do, or it's overwhelming. And in the case of autism, it's overwhelming. But it doesn't matter which end. It's either boring or overwhelming because they don't pay attention to the difficulty of the task, and they don't pay attention to the value obtained from doing the work successfully.
for the purposes of this discussion, boring means lower stage than the person
Right.
performing it would like, and
Right.
overwhelming
Right.
means too high a stage.
Right. Too high a stage and oversimplifying the difficulty of the task. Not having an understanding. I mean, why were the Vikings successful without occupying?
Well, what is success mean?
Success means you leave your genes and memes. And they left their genes. They didn't concentrate on memes. All right? So, if... and the most successful group of people, meme-wise, are Jews.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they have conquered most religion in the world is some form of Judaism. Muslims are, Christians are,
Well, what about Buddhists and Hindus?
but there's so few Buddhists. And Hindus, remember, Hindus are a sixth of the world,
Yeah.
but Muslims and Christians are much bigger. They're just sects of Judaism. And, but even Buddha was probably influenced by Judaism. There's pretty good records that there were interchanges between those cultures.
Okay, can I ask you another question?
Yeah. It could be not true, but what I just said, but we don't know.
All right. Who are some of the people that taught you the most?
Oh, that's a good question. I've already written that up,
Oh,
but I'll tell you the list. I had a lot of disabilities, and I don't think I mean, I had a very warped idea of who I was in terms of how smart I was because of all the disabilities. But I think that Mrs. Kelly in the second part of the fourth grade understood, had a good picture of me, and was able to form an alliance. And I think I had some teachers in summer school in the third grade that understood that I had disabilities. I don't think those disabilities were named in the 40s, but I think they understood. These were people who could see that I was different and could respond differently, and I think that made my, in a positive way, that made my life much better. I also think that I think the most influence was about not trusting authority and not believing what other people said. And I think that was also because I didn't fit the mold. And I would say those were the general things. I think my friends had a big influence on me. Yeah, I think Sandra, I just don't remember her name, but I have it written down. Sandra taught me about how terrible death was and family loss. And I think that had a huge impact on me when her father got killed on Wilshire Boulevard in La Brea. And I didn't understand why it was so upsetting. I think that just had an incredible impact on me. And David Kahn had a very big impact on me. But I think his mother even had more of an impact. But I was influenced by two groups of people, peers to some extent, not very much, but their parents.
Yeah.
I learned about well, I grew up in an extremely privileged world. At the time, I didn't know it was so privileged, but it was not privileged monetarily as much as it was privileged by the resources that I was surrounded with. And I was thinking about how Steve and I went to the same high school. I met Stravinsky twice. He never met Stravinsky. He grew up in the same Hollywood I did pretty much, but he never, I mean, he knew Chico Hamilton, but who was a jazz drummer, but he never really got anything out of this incredibly rich cultural thing. He never ever knew how to mine it.
Yeah, what led to you getting so much more out of this environment?
I think I was incredibly smart. I think that the distrust of authority and the distrust of peers
Yeah.
meant that I was much more interested in what adults had to say. And I think I always was a theoretician. I was, even when I was 5 years old, I was trying to solve the evolutionary problem of why dogs and horses are different.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, kids don't think, it might be a passing question,
Right.
but they don't stick with it. And I always had to figure out why things work.
Did anyone help you become a better theoretician?
Not in those days.
Oh, but at some point, right?
Well, I think the most influential person. Well, there were two groups of people. I think that I grew up with Rick Nelson, and I think Rick and I had a very comedic understanding of life.
Right.
And we were great pals, and we would do outrageous things together. And we had a very rich fantasy life, even in elementary school, which
Right.
I think most kids would play standard games, but they wouldn't invent games. And I think we were much more innovative. And we would try out various roles.
Right.
We would play bums, we would play handicapped people, we would hitchhike, we would,
How old were you during this period?
I would say pretty much from third, fourth grade. I mean, I remember meeting Hunter Hancock. He gave us a ride home. And then I started listening to his jazz show, which was from the Valley. And he was one of the earlier producers of rhythm and blues and jazz. And there's a very famous song called Hunting for Hunter. You can look it up and play it. It's on YouTube. And so, I mean, if you lived
Yeah.
in Marlboro, you would never have met Hunter.
Yeah.
You just never would,
So you've talked a little bit about all these influential people you interacted with at a very young age. Do you think
But
there's
I
any way
think-
you could tell us what it is you learned from them?
No, come on. That would take 10 hours.
10 hours, so there's a lot of little things that came
Yeah, I
together.
wrote up I think that Duncan Luce is the father of the model of hierarchical complexity. And I think Nevin is the father of discounting. And I think John Molino and Galanter taught me signal detection. But I think that the fact that I became really so heavily involved in the psychophysics is due to John Molino, who was a good friend of mine and a graduate student. And we worked together on auditory localization. I think that having worked for years on auditory localization, I think I learned an approach to understanding the world that really worked. That auditory localization shifts with the frequency of the signals.
Yeah.
How you localize. And the fact you can't localize deep bass at all, and very high tones you can't localize either.
And these findings influenced your work in general?
Yes, because what it said is there's systematic differences in even what you consider very simple processes. So the idea is you couldn't look at localization separate from frequency, right? And it was not linear. And how you did it changed. So 3 things: how you did it, what you did, and what the problem was, and why it was. There's physics involved, so you had to really put together a big picture. You couldn't even say, why do earphones not work? They don't, because you can't tell whether something's in your head, in the center of your head, in front of you, in back of you, or on top or bottom. It's incomplete. You can just see hear left to right. It's a failed system. And so most people don't realize it's failed.
Is it possible they have different goals for their sound?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, all you have, John and I had this discussion last year that you could computer modify the signals so that you could create the up and down and front and back. But you'd have, you can't do it. See, the problem is and we invented a way of doing things that we never patented. We should have, which was we were going to take condenser microphones and also make them into speakers, and you would switch back and forth at 100K, so you wouldn't lose either the speaker part or the microphone part, but you would be able to create the whole sound field, and you'd have thousands of these things, and you'd sit in the center. That's what it takes to create the total sound field. Now, if you did digitize it and get the delays and the intensities and the frequencies all right, you can recreate it. Okay, but you think anybody? It's just. I mean, when you buy a real hi-fi receiver, they will simulate 4-channel sound pretty well, but not. But it's much easier to do with speakers. But you always, because of the Haas effect, you always hear a speaker because it's the time of first arrival. So when you begin to understand audition, even a simple problem, localization, you realize that the world, you have to have good representations of the variables, and you have to understand the physics, and you can't just do correlations and make sense of the world. That's what the problem with liberalism. Things are correlated, but they don't understand causality. They infer causality.
And that's specific to liberalism?
Or conservatism.
Okay.
But any simple-minded explanation is flawed because they don't understand. They always believe in free will. And free will, both on the left and the right. The free will of the rich people versus for the left, and the free will of the lazy people for their free will on the right.
The audience might not be that familiar with what free will means in this context. Do you have any kind of definition?
Yeah. Free will means it's a property of the individual soul or self. It's not, they're not in some grand, complicated, indeterminate system with attractors. There's somebody to blame is basically what it means. So, it's like Wall Street is the cause of all our problems. I mean, it's part of the problem, but I once listed how many things had to go wrong for the crisis of 2007. It had to, it had to be 7 things happening together. Any 2 of them not happening, it wouldn't have happened. And they just don't see that. They blame Wall Street as if it's a person. Here's a case where there were contingencies. short-term contingencies are always probably necessary for survival, bad for long-term survival. Short-term contingencies. And the short-term, like why were the estimates of the risk of bundling worthless mortgages? I mean, the rating agencies, because the people who paid for the assessments by the rating agencies were the same people who are getting rated, So conflict of interest is, the left is right about that, but they don't understand that everybody is subject to that. So the unions have a conflict of interest. They drive up prices without driving up productivity. And that wrecks economies. Just go look at Brazil. What happens when you give money away? You get inflation, you get a lack of investment, costs people, many more people are worse off because of giving the money away. It just killed the economy. And you would not predict that by left-wing politics, because giving money to poor people who are starving is always good. Not non-contingently. And that was one of Herrnstein's and Skinner's points, that it's not that reinforcement is bad, but non-contingent reinforcement is bad. And the left has never learned that, and the right has never learned that reinforcement is not bad. So, they're both very stupid models for the world. That's why I had to start my own political party, the empirical party. Because but it was very clear by my second year of college that I even knew it earlier, because I knew all these communists. And I had been to church. And I had a religious grandmother. So, what was your next question?
My next question was, how have your romantic relationships affected your work?
Well, not much.
Not much?
No, except for when Vicki Clark broke up with me, I was depressed for a year. And when Joanne broke up with me, I was depressed for a year. But I think a year out of your life is nothing. A year or two doesn't mean anything. That's it.
So
Just
none of your
cause
partners have had a positive effect?
Patty. I don't think anybody. I think Vicki. Vicki affected me because she was strong and smart, and that gave me hope. Because most of the women I knew were awful. I mean, most of the people I knew were awful. They were stupid. I mean, they just didn't understand things. I don't think Sandra Brennan, that was her name. I mean, I learned from them, but I don't think they affected my work. I had friends that were women that helped me.
Yeah.
But, I was always good at getting help.
So how have your friends affected your work?
Well, I work with a lot of my friends, and we work together. I mean, Lamont and I have collaborated, our whole, for 40 years.
Are there differences in working with a friend versus a colleague?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we share a degree of intimacy. I mean, my friends tell me about their lives. And once in a while I tell my friends, but very few. I mean, I've collaborated with my friends. I mean, Linda Brissett and I wrote, I think, one of the best things I ever wrote, which is on creative scientists. No one ever reads it, but it's a great set of papers. But romantic, I don't think I mean, Patty
said
and
Patty
I,
had no
yeah,
friends. What
well,
was
Patty
that?
and I, well, I couldn't really write, and Patty helped me all along and still does. I mean, I can't edit anything. Kyle fills half that role. At least Kyle understands when something isn't communicating. Right, Kyle?
Yep. Is Kyle the new Patty?
No, we're not romantically involved.
Well, now that that's on the record, are you ready for another question?
But I would say Len and I mean, I have 40 collaborators at any given time. So the fact of my ability to politically organize is extremely central to my being successful. But I think Duncan Luce really, if you had to list the sort of out of the blue people, it was Duncan Luce. And Duncan Luce was in the psychophysics group, and he would attend the meetings of in the 7th floor lab of Herrnstein, and he had real courage. I mean, he wrote a book on choice that made him very famous, and he didn't believe most of it now. And he really thought that Dick had the right representation in choice. That, but I think, I mean, I made a lot of money because of Will Vaughn.
Oh.
Well, Will Vaughn, and the fact that I'm a professor at the medical school is due to Will Vaughn. Because Will Vaughn knew this group of people that Harold was part of. I met Harold, and Harold invited me to psychiatry and law, and that's how I became an assistant professor at the medical school. So, Will, and I also met this guy who, on Clinton Street where Will lived, and I invested with him, and that's how I ended up with the properties I have. So Will had a very big impact on me. And Deanna Kuhn got me to buy this house. She said I should get a 2-family because I won't have to pay the mortgage. She was right.
Because you rent out part of it?
Yeah. And I never paid for the mortgage. And she wrote some of the most important early papers of mine, including, and Rick Richards played a huge role in my life. I mean, Rick was a much better writer than I was. He's the only student I ever had that didn't finish his PhD. He dropped out after not revising and not turning in his revisions. He went to Cornell and worked with Michael Bassages. So there are tragedies. But I count up, I have 40 different people I collaborate with, most on average. And some of them I'm friends with, some of them I'm not. I think James Day and I are friends. I don't think most of my relationships are symmetrical. I think people trust me more than I trust them. And it's always been.
Is there any one where it's the other way around?
Not that I know of. Maybe. I don't think so. I'd have to think.
Okay.
What's your next
My
question?
next question is, which artists and works of art have inspired you the most?
Well, it's clearly Lamont
Yeah?
and Miriam, yeah. I mean, there's no question. I mean, we're soulmates in that we're minimalists. And we like the same kind of minimalism.
Yeah. And does that affect the theories you make?
Well, I'm a minimalist through and through.
In every aspect of your life?
Yeah, of course. Except I have OCD, so I can't get rid of my junk.
Right.
I'm a failed minimalist. But Lamont has exactly the same problem. He has a whole floor devoted to his junk. I only have a third. No, Lamont and I and Miriam, I think we're all artists.
Yeah.
I think if people asked me, was I a standard scientist, I would say not in the least. I'm much more of an artist in my approach to things.
So what's the difference between you and the standard scientist?
I'm not obsessed with verification, and I don't care what other people think.
Does that tie into minimalism?
What?
Your lack of interest in verification and you're not caring what other people think?
No, I don't think it's related. Minimalism is always, if you read the history of science, it's always worked better. I mean, how many equations do you think it takes to represent Darwin? You know, it has been.
I do, but I don't know the answer. 3?
Yeah, about 3.
Yeah.
Basically, you just need chaos theory, right? And the mechanism is very clear, right?
The mechanism?
Yeah, the mechanism. Yeah, we know about genes. We know about RNA. We know about that you can modify genes for a period of time with strong outcomes. We can't distinguish always the environmental effects directly and on the genes, but we think genes are modifiable by environment now. So Lamarck won a little bit, not as big as liberals would like, and not as little as actually, conservatives and liberals both are obsessed with free will and heritability. They believe in free will and don't believe in heritability.
Both of them?
Yes. That's why they think punishment, the right thinks punishment works. They don't see any disabilities.
Is there any art that you think students of science should interact with?
All of it.
All of it?
Yeah, I mean,
No
I
recommendations?
well, I mean, I have my favorite artists, but that's mostly. I think they should in jazz. They should really listen. I think there are a number of giants, but I think Charlie Parker and Bill Evans were really important. Charlie Parker especially, and Louis Armstrong. And I think that artists have to have convictions, and you know, in sculpture, I mean, you know, I like the minimalist sculptures. I really like them. But I knew all of them. So, you know, that's another group of people. I mean, I used to go to parties with Andy Warhol. I didn't particularly like his art, but I think it was important. I think he's a forerunner of Steve Jobs.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, I think he understood that. I mean, I think he was heavily into marketing. I liked the movies that he sponsored more than his art. Those quirky movies. I like them a lot. I'm much more interested in performance art and TV and movies than I am into painting. I like photography though, but I don't particularly. I mean, most painters. I mean, you know, I like mobiles, so I surely like Moreau. And I appreciate Picasso, but I don't own any dead people. These people, this guy is dead now, but when I got these, they were alive people.
He just pointed at a painting from a dead person.
Well, now dead, but
Yeah.
when I got them, I don't have any. I have no dead art. I don't collect people. I don't. I'm not into the art business.
Okay.
And but I don't like the theft of intellectual property. You know, but I think it's important that Lenny Bruce's daughter gets money from his estate. Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I think I think wealth should have a degree of heritability, because I think the people who do these things often engage in great sacrifice, self-sacrifice. They should surely, when Bartok descendants deserve a piece of the pie. Their father, grandfather, great-grandfather died young. And I think that it's tragic that some people never had children. Oscar Wilde never had any kids, But Oscar Wilde's very popular today. So, why shouldn't his descendants benefit? They should. I mean, he had a terrible life. All right, what else?
Has anger played a role in your creative process?
Only in the sense that I'm anti-authority. No.
So you tend to create things that go against authority?
No, I don't care.
Don't
I
care?
ignore authority.
Okay.
I would say that in social justice in the big picture, Larry Kohlberg and I were great friends. We had it served as motivation, but my relationship with him. I mean, I told him at Dorothy Danner's wedding that I would save his theory from being a left-wing theory. And I did, and I really set out to do it. I mean, it wasn't something that I didn't actively work on. By 82, I realized I could depoliticize moral development. This dog got 2 walks today in the last hour because he didn't do his business the first time.
The first time I just got water.
Oh, I
And
see.
He wanted to follow me, so.
So, what else?
Do you think a person can gain access to the truth?
No, I don't think. The truth, if you think of it, we have a worm's eye view of the world. and all the stage limitations affect us. So as evolution progresses, both in androids and in superions, they will understand things that make us look like chimps and worms.
Should we still try to access the truth?
Of course.
Why?
It's the only thing to do that's fun. Art is one form of truth, and science is the other, and math.
Those are the 3 forms.
Right.
One more question.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about your scientific attitudes, but this one is trying to appeal more to your comedian. What would be the ideal punchline at the end of your life?
Well, I would say as I'm dying, well, this is, I'm in the hospital and everybody is bemoaning the fact that I've just had a triple bypass. I said, listen, this was a great experience. So I would say that.
This was a great experience.
Yeah, dying is also a great experience. What can you say?
All right.
It's all part of life. Dying is part of life, being in the hospital. I mean, everybody thinks that everything should be judged, and I don't have that view.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.